I mean, that was one of my biggest worries in Rhodes Farm. I'd come out of Rhodes Farm, and at some point I would, because when you suffer from anorexia, you don't eat. You starve yourself. You try and restrict what you eat, and obviously, when you start eating again, the biggest worry on your mind is you're gonna get obese, you're gonna get large, you're gonna become the thing you didn't want to be. So
Well,
obviously, that kind of
you're going to become the thing that your eating disorder didn't want you to be, though, isn't it? You know,
yeah.
the actual person inside of you is actually at the back of your mind when the eating disorder has a hold.
So it was weird. So obviously, you're coming out of that thinking, "Nah, I'll be fine, I'll be fine." But that biggest worry is you're gonna go down that spiral. It's the voice inside your head that doesn't want. It's doing whatever it can to make sure you stick to that point where you are like 5 stone.
Yeah.
And it's a voice you're always gonna have, and you're always gonna fight. So when you start eating normally and start just being a normal human being who's not trying to worry about food, that voice is always there, niggling in the back of your head, just going at you. Then you shouldn't be eating that.
Yeah.
No. Eat that, you're gonna get fat again. And I haven't personally got rid of that voice myself. That voice is always there. I think it's always going to be there. I don't believe it'll ever go. I think I'll get to a point where I've got it under control. But if ever something ever happens in my life, or
So how?
I don't know, I think we might come back. But I don't like to think that. I mean, I might hopefully, touch wood, be good for the rest of my life. But
No, I think that you've got a very positive thing going on in your life at the moment, and that will keep everything at bay. And if you can continue that, I think the eating disorder will become less and less in your mind. And I know that I mean I've got other friends who they've become married and they've got children now, and the eating disorder, they say that it's still there, but it doesn't bother them, and they can continue living a normal life, which is great. It's really good.
Myself, yeah. I mean, I eat what I want now. I enjoy it. Now and then I do have the occasional threat and a bit of a worry. But I can pretty much do what I like now. I mean,
It's good. It's really good, man.
Yeah. But that voice, it's always there. It's always in the back of your head. If you suffer from an eating disorder or anything of the kind, you've most likely got that voice. You've most likely got it in the back of your head. It kind of tells you what it wants you to think, but it's not actually the truth.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like being in school and you've got that dick in the back of the class who's always chanting and doing stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
But no.
I think if you can appreciate that it is irrational and it's not the truth, then you can sort of try to ignore it and do what you actually want to do rather than what the voice is telling you to do. Yeah. And I think this relates to another question of what's the best tip to give to someone who is just telling someone to let go of an eating disorder. It's that you can't just let go.
No.
It's a voice that is essentially a part of you.
Yeah.
And to just say to let go is to say to let go of part of yourself.
Yeah.
Which, it's really difficult, and it requires so much therapy, and it requires you to continuously beat at it and never sort of succumb to it again. And I don't think anyone who hasn't suffered, like if someone doesn't suffer from an eating disorder, they'll never truly appreciate what it means, and they'll never truly understand. So it can be almost impossible to describe something that is totally irrational to someone who has a rational mind.
Yeah. It's like that's why I think when you're dealing with a therapist who has never had an eating disorder, who doesn't really understand, it's going to be the hardest thing you're ever going to cope with or deal with. Personally, the best times I've had help with when I've had therapy was when I've been with someone who's also had an eating disorder. They can understand that state of mind you're in.
Yeah.
If you try and state to someone, I tried to tell one of my therapists, I've had loads. I've had absolute loads. And there was one bloke who was trying to speak to, and I said to him, there's a voice in my head that tells me things which I don't believe is true, but I begin to believe them. I believe it's true. I believe what it says. I believe what I see. Because since I've got like body issues, body morphic issues.
Yeah, body dysmorphism.
I don't see what other people see. I always see it always completely opposite. So obviously when that voice in my head tells me what it wants to tell me, I believe it wholeheartedly. Now it's getting to a point now in my life where it's like, actually, piss off. Don't believe it. But now it does bite me. Now, when you're trying to say that to a therapist, there's a voice in your head. Alarm bells ring, okay? And these start going around a track of, do you hear other voices in your head? And all that sort of stuff. And no, the voices I'm hearing at this point in time are myself, but it's not my thought process, you know?
Yeah.
It's not mine. It's telling me things like, oh, you're fat, you're obese, if you eat that, you're going to be massive, it's going to hurt you. And you want to listen to it, oh, don't eat that. And it's not you, it's always there niggling in the back of your head. And obviously you try and tell that to a therapist, you don't understand. Now, when I was speaking to one of the therapists who did have eating disorders, she was brilliant.
Yeah,
was good. I mean, she knew exactly what I was trying to discuss. She knew from personal experiences, I know what you mean. And it's not another person, it's not anything like that. It's just this irrational thought, this thought process, this voice inside your head which has been created. It's the eating disorder sitting in the back that's just taking control, and it's just telling you things which aren't true. And it's just speaking to her, it's like the best time when I've ever had any form of recovery or therapy has been group therapy in Rose Farm, because we're all sitting there around a table or sitting in the chairs, and every single one of us had the exact same thing. We all had that voice. We all had that voice telling us what to do and what not to do, and it's special, you know. If it was just one person, it would be kind of, you're crazy. You need to get checked out. But the fact is, it's all of us, and it's something you just need to embrace and just understand that it's not true what it's telling you. So to be able to just let go, it's a tough one, because you've got to get to a point where you don't actually just let go. You begin to recover.
Yeah.
And you understand, like, actually, you know what? I'm at that point now where I need to recover. You'll get to a point in your recovery stage, or when you're going to start to recover, that hits you. Mine was when, as soon as I walked into Rhodes Farm, I knew I didn't want to be there. I knew I had to get better. And that's when my recovery began. I just knew. It wasn't of letting go, it was just beginning to eat again.
And I think it's just wanting to get your own life back. Because I mean, when I unfortunately relapsed and I had to go to hospital, the thing that was driving me was, I want to be a doctor, and I can't do that if I'm stuck in a hospital for the rest of my life. You know, if it comes down to me having to, continuously battle it, I will do that for the rest of my life. But ultimately, I do want to get better. Yeah. And if you can get into that mindset, I think you'll find it a lot easier to first battle it, but then when you're further along the line, you'll find it a lot easier, and that voice will be way back in the back of your mind. The other question, I mean, you said you didn't want to be in Rhodes Farm. Did you ever miss Rhodes Farm?
Hell yeah, yeah. I mean, we always aimed for Rhodes Farm as to be my place where I got my recovery. You had the Priory, you had different places, but Rhodes Farm had like the best success ratio. You know, it had the best stories. Most people who came out of things like the Priory and stuff, or the one we were looking at in my area, they'd come out, but they'd be back in the space of 2-3 weeks. It wasn't really a rehabilitation. It was kind of just get in there, get food in you, and then get you out. Whereas Rhodes Farm had a complete treatment. You had group therapy, you had family therapy, you had the therapy by yourself. It kind of re-taught you things again. It was a community, it was like a family, and it was something that we wanted to be for where I got my therapy at. So obviously when you're in there and you've got 15, 20 other people in there, all kind of your same age, going through the same things, they become your family.
Yeah.
So obviously when we left, I missed the hell out of you and Warren, you know. So it's kind of like wanting to see you again, but obviously we live on literally different parts of England.
Of the country, yeah.
Yeah, and it's a nightmare to actually try and stay in touch. But we did by gaming.
Yeah.
But obviously I had my own issues, so I stopped kind of socialising with people. So I lost a lot of contacts in that point, and especially yourself, because we've only spoken briefly only on certain occasions for the last few years, and it's depressing. You know, you're on closest friends. You're like a brother to me down there.
Yeah.
Even though if you did put my slippers in the freezer and stuff. But So yeah, I did miss it. I did miss the people down there, and it was good. And also, it was just different. You know, it's the idea of actually being somewhere where you're not necessarily in school. You're still doing your school stuff. You're still getting your GCSEs, but it's not necessarily the thing. It's like when you're in school when you're younger and you go on those like little youth hostel trips. You know, it was brilliant.
No, I completely relate to that because I remember when I got out, the first thing that I wanted to do was go back in because
Yeah,
it's a place where you can sort of release all of the control because you're
where
obviously not fully recovered when you leave, and
hmm,
it's a place where you can just release everything and they can do everything for you. You don't have to
yeah,
worry about meal preparations, and you don't have to worry about anything. You know, you've got a schedule to the day, so you're never actually bored. It was something that that sort of order is something that I missed. But then whenever I went home, as you said, you know, you've lost contact with your friends by that point, so it's quite difficult to retain that sort of social bit, and you
yeah,
know, that gets put aside. Your parents aren't exactly the best at preparing the meals and keeping on top of everything because they're not
yeah,
professionally trained,
hmm,
and so that means you sort of want to, even though when you originally went there, the first thing you wanted to leave. But it certainly took a while for me to want to stay at home, and
yeah.
I think gaming with you was great fun. It was something that I couldn't do when I was at Rhodes Farm,
No,
and sort of getting back into the swing of school because by that point we were in our sort of GCSE times, weren't we?
yeah,
So
yeah,
it was quite difficult by that point because we'd missed so much school already and we were having to get back to that. But there were things that slowly I was beginning to realise were better at home than were at Rhodes
yeah,
Farm, and it did take a while, but it was good that Rhodes Farm had that sort of aftercare thing. I
yeah,
mean, for me as well, because I went back quite a lot, but it worked.